Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to a special event for April National Poetry Month. And we're delighted to welcome Thelma T. Reyna as our poet for the month. Thelma is also the Poet Laureate Emerita for Altadena. She has received lots and lots of awards for her books. We have two of her books in our library. We have Hearts in Common poems and Breath and Bone poems. So in order for everyone to have the most optimal viewing and listening, if you could please make sure that you are muted. We are going to be recording the program today, and it will be put on our Pasadena Public Library YouTube channel. I'm Christine Reeder, the Adult Services Librarian, and I get to plan these wonderful programs and work with all of these authors. The Pasadena Public Library is exceptionally pleased to be able to announce that next Thursday, April the 15th, we are going to be opening up for a limited service inside the library. As you know, throughout the pandemic, we have been offering curbside service, but now you can go into the libraries. So into Central Library, Hastings Library, and La Pintoresca. The schedule and the details are on the Pasadena Public Library webpage. So we look forward to having you read the details and joining us and being able to welcome you back for limited service, an hour a day. Of course, if you choose not to come into the libraries, we still have curbside service, chat service, and ask us service to answer all of your questions. And of course, we are still going to be having all of these virtual programs. So let me tell you a little bit about Thelma. She is the author of 6 books. And as I told you, we have 2 of her poetry books in our collection, Hearts in Common poems, Breath and Bone poems, and soon we will have the book for today, Dearest Papa. She has written a short story collection, 2 poetry chapter books that we have, and 3 full-length poetry collections, which have collectively won 18 national literary awards. Her reading will be followed by discussion of the journey of grief, the role of poetry in it, and then followed by questions and answers. And Thelma says one of her most enjoyable parts is to have a conversation with everyone that comes in. So chat will be private with me. You know how to do chat. You go on to Zoom, you click the little chat icon and put your question there. And when Thelma has finished her presentation, we will ask the questions. So Thelma has told me that this pandemic has taught us the immense grief that can hit any one of us unexpectedly. In this international award-winning book, Dearest Papa, a memoir in poems, overcoming the sudden death of a loved one, her husband, who went in for a very brief surgery and unexpectedly passed away. He was called Papa by their grandchildren and family. This is a brave, gentle, defiant love story, as well as a heart-stirring account in 65 poems of how Reyna navigated her first year of mourning, beginning 2 weeks after Papa's devastating death, and how she turned to memories, family, nature, and reflection as mitigation of loss. So with that, I'm just thrilled to be able to introduce Thelma to you. Thelma has spoken at Pasadena Central Library when we were open several years ago, and we're delighted she can be with us today virtually. Welcome, Thelma.
Thank you so much, Christine. Yes, indeed. I always I love your library. I love what you do with it and for authors and the community. And thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm very glad to see all these wonderful people here today. I'm looking forward to their commentary, to their questions, to our discussion. Um, as Christine says, I started the book very soon after my husband's passing away. He went in for a very minor arm operation. It was surgery that he had had before. It took about an hour and a half, outpatient. We had a dinner date that night, and it was going to be at the same hospital, same surgeon, same procedure. The first one, the little device they implanted, didn't work. So on October the 5th, 2018, I was with my husband all day from the morning. I took him to the hospital. And that day I came home alone late at night. He died very suddenly, very unexpectedly during this extremely minor operation. And it was just like a thunderbolt from the sky. I knew that I wanted to write a book about him. I'm a poet, I'm a writer, and that's what we do. Poets, I've often believed, are frontline responders to a crisis, to a tragedy. We oftentimes turn to our words, to our writing as solace, as understanding, as comfort, and of course, faced with the greatest loss in my life, I knew that I would want to write a memoir to pay tribute to my husband. We had been married for 50 years. And we had luckily, fortunately, been able to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary a few months before his passing. So it had to be a memoir. And in my mind, it had to be in poetry. So this is why I'm calling it a memoir in poems. I'm sure I did not invent the genre, but to me, it felt comfortable and right. I believed that the writing of the book would help me during my first year of grief, my first year of widowhood. So in a couple of weeks after his death, I started writing. I did not have a plan. I did not know. I was in the throes of grief, and you just take it one day at a time. I think, I'll bet you that a number of you are familiar with Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's very, very famous 5 stages. I see some heads nodding. 5 stages of grief and loss. And that's basically what I had as my protection, as in my toolkit. The previous book that I had done centered very strongly on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief and loss. So I felt that I knew what I was in for. And for those of you who maybe haven't heard of that, or you have forgotten, basically when death hits your life, especially if it's suddenly, unexpectedly, oftentimes the first stage is called denial. No, this didn't happen. It couldn't have happened. The second stage is called negotiating. Dear God, please don't let this happen. Take it away from me. The third stage is anger. Dear God, how could you have done this? The fourth stage is the hardest of all, because that is depression. And it can be deep, deep depression. And that's oftentimes where people are possibly endangered. And after that, the fifth stage is called resolution or acceptance. And it doesn't mean that you're happy with what has happened, but you realize that what has happened, and it's not going to be undone. And that the only place forward now in your journey of grief is forward. There is no other choice. These 5 stages of grief and loss are not linear. I explain them in a linear way, but they are cyclical. They are iterative. You might skip one phase. You might go from denial to depression, come back to, and back and forth. Every person is unique. As a matter of fact, one of the things I want to impress upon upon you, my friends and fellow participants today, is that in the journey of grief and loss, first of all, every grief is important. Every loss is important. I know that in this pandemic, we have lost over 560,000 human souls. We have had death in our faces daily. We have been bombarded. We are stunned. We are numb. And those are horrific, very, very hard to understand and accept. But every death is important. Every loss is important. And all grief needs to be treated with respect and the honoring that it deserves. Every path is unique. And whether you go through all those 5 stages of grief, what order you go in them, this is all a unique thing that you do not know, nobody knows. And you just have to trust in it, and knowing what lies ahead of you, whether you hear it from other people, such as you're doing now from me, or whether you've been on this journey before, as much as you know, the better it is. And the other thing that I'd like to impress upon you is it is more important, it is more healthy to face your grief and to deal with it, to navigate it, to reflect upon it, to meditate upon it, to try to walk the path of what must be done to recuperate your life, to salvage the memory and honor the memory of your departed one. You have to let it happen. And that is part of the underlying lessons about any grief, any loss that we experience. You have to authentically embrace it. And when I started to write my memoir about my husband, this was one of the overriding points that I kept in mind, even when it was very, very, very hard. If it was hard, I didn't write that day. I stayed in bed all day or whatever, or I put my pen down and curled up on the floor and wept. Whatever the poem was, whatever my feeling was, whatever was going on. But we have to wrestle with it. We have to come to grips with it and to understand it. And each path is unique. I'd like to share with you, I think I've picked 9 poems from the book that kind of exemplify some of the things that I just said, and some of the things that Christine said in her introduction. She mentioned that in our talk today, we want to talk about some of the mitigators of loss, and she mentioned 4 that she and I had communicated about, and one of them is memory. And let me see if I remember them all. One is memory, the other is family, the other is nature, which, by the way, I consider to be absolutely the biggest mitigator of pain. It helped me through that very, very difficult year, because I spent the whole first year of widowhood writing the book. I took it all up to his the first year anniversary of his death. And one of my poems is actually talking about that. And then the last one is a little bit more abstract, but the whole concept of reflecting, meditating, being totally in the moment and trying to just digest what it is that you're experiencing, what it is that is happening in your life. And they just, all these elements, and I'm sure other people have a different list, but those are what worked for me. Just thinking about family, reliving scenes with family, discussions with family, what he did with our kids when they were little, trips we took, walking out in nature, sitting in my backyard, listening to the birds. I still do that. Every morning I have my little cup of coffee in my hand. First thing I do is I go to my back gardens. I sit there quiet. I listen to the birds, listen, to the wind and the water, if it's, whatever. But do that, have something that works for you. So my poems are basically going to be touching on those elements. And it's roughly chronological. The book is divided into 5 sections. They are not exactly the 5 stages of loss that I mentioned. In fact, only 2 of the stages of loss are actually represented in this book, and I will read those as well. But it is roughly chronological from the beginning of my husband's, well, from his teenagehood, actually from his babyhood. I didn't know him until college, but I learned a lot about his background, how he was abandoned when he was 2 years old by his mother. And he was the father, the son of an immigrant from Mexico who never, ever had a day of schooling in his life. He was raised by the father himself. And Victor was a pioneer in his family line. He was the first to ever go to college. So he was a high school math teacher. We met in college. We both got our degrees. We got married, had a baby, moved out to California, and that was more than 50 years ago. And as I say, the rest is history. He was a success, my husband, and this is a tribute to his life. But I'm going to start where the topic of our event today starts, which is loss. And this is one of the steps in Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book. Of course, she wrote prose books, and I just interpreted them as a poem if I could. This is How Grief Goes is the title, and I have an epigraph. When we are grieving, people may wonder about us, and we may wonder about ourselves. And that's a statement from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. When loss is swift, when it strikes like a viper in a pot, blunting hopes and well-laid plans, the hole that swallows us is bottomless and fierce. Emptiness unspools like mummy's tape, endless, frayed, muffling, gagging, dooming lips and eyes to tombs devoid of words and light, stripped of loving hands, caverns of ululations. Loss flattens us, but this is how grief goes. This is how we sink to rise, how brokenness is patched together again, how despair ultimately defies death. And my second and third poems basically deal with the early parts after the loss, the first few days after the loss. This one is like immediately after the loss, now that I was home alone. How poems are born. While walking room to room, to tuck bed sheets in around the edge, to wash my cup in morning light of sink, drop soiled laundry in the tub, wipe coffee stains from tile, sweep lint from sofa cushions crumpled flat, fill cubbies with his books, fingers, hands, legs, move like motons, clearing dust, while poems rush in like fools, disembodied, spinning reels of recollection, stringing phrases, weaving words he spoke, parsing empty spaces of the life lived here, making sense of him and me and death. The poems are born. And we've all heard about survivor's guilt, and sometimes even when it's irrational, and sometimes it hits us, and oftentimes it comes in the early part after the loss. And this one here, I read an essay by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and one of the things he said is, write it in your heart that every day is the best day of the year. And I disagreed with him. So this poem is called Best Day of the Year, and I'm answering him. Yes, Emerson, yes, except that one, when his heart crashed and I couldn't make it throb again, though I was down the hall waiting as his eyes went blank. And though I used to save him from the precipice time and again, Bedside wife hawk when white coats aired or nurses flitted from his room too soon. And though my fingers drew a blessing on his forehead, kissed his nose, tweaked his chin, and he said, I'll see you in an hour. And though they wheeled him like a mummy down the hall we knew so well, smiling and unafraid of tiny nicks they would slid into his arm. And though you're always right, Emerson, your brain transcending us, I must disagree, Emerson, for that one day, that one day, I couldn't save him. And this one here, remember that it's important to think about family, to relish your memories. And this is an incident that happened in the last couple of years of his life. We were taking our grandchildren down the street, and my husband, who was known to be a funny guy, a witty guy, declared himself champion of the world out of the blue. And so this poem is called, and this is exactly what happened. This poem is called Champion of the World. So random, you declaring yourself champion of the world, as we, two grandkids, you and I, rode across California Avenue to the ice cream place. And the debate began, rollicking, fierce, with our grandkids in the back barely containing themselves in their seatbelts, laughing hard as they demanded proof from you. How can you be champion of the whole wide entire planet, Papa? Indeed, how could he be? Like little lawyers, Charlie and Cassie laid out fact after fact why there's no such prize, and how you just can't be this champion thing, Papa. I had the front seat view of you, your mischief profile, your ersatz smug smile as you drove chin high, insisting to our two little angels that you were the champ. Your reasons were a riot to them, and we three wondered why our Papa had gotten this harebrained scheme. Looking back now, I see the eternal twinkling child soul in you basking in our laughter on an ordinary run to the ice cream place. This one here is an example of how sometimes during your grieving, just memories, old pictures, old scenes of you and your lost one will just pop up out of nowhere and totally catch you off guard. This is part of walking that journey of loss. And this one is called Old Habits. How easy it is. How easy for the brain to trick us into wiping pain away, into thinking you're here at my door or in the kitchen by my side, sipping at the mug, sighing at the early hour, calling my name, your mouth at my ear. How easy, how easy. The brain contorts memory to shadows of itself, clipping connections to calendars and seasons, children growing into future mists we veil over when we're tricked. I hear footsteps, jingling keys, the gentle click of a door unlocked, water lapping at your wash bowl, gentle, curling, steaming, stream girdling, and you humming as you shave your neck. How easy it is to hear these precious sounds again, these tiny tunes of love, tricking death and me with double shots of cruelty, warmth at the reliving, and stabs of recollection of seeing you lowered, sinking, roses sliding to the soil. And this next one here It's actually 3 pages in the book, and it's a Tonka sequence. And for those of you who may have forgotten, a Tonka is a haiku followed immediately, the same stanza, 3-line haiku, and then 2 lines of 7 syllables each. And that is called a Tonka. And it's usually like a haiku, it's usually just a standalone poem. But I like to write haiku sequences where I string a bunch of them together to tell a story or to comment on an issue. And this one is a section from this Tonka sequence. The sequence is called Ordinary Things. And it's one section is work, another one is self, and this one is family. And they are all about Dearest Papa, family. He gave us nature as a balm we'll always have. Cool shade, birds splashing and gurgling fountains kept filled, birdhouses on trees and stakes. Nature showcased bright in our spacious yard, 20 fruit trees, beds bordered with boulders spilling blooms, vines, potted plants parked on patios. Large redwood deck he built with trellises and roof, overlooks gardens he birthed through 50 years toil, planting ongoing glory. Such ordinary things he touched with fingers kind. Such ordinary things he did and gave for those he cherished and left behind. This one here is a follow-up. It's another look at nature and its presence in our world and how we can be in the moment, and we can look at it, let it soothe our soul. And this is an example of one of those moments as I was writing the book, and this is called Come to My Patio. Come to my patio and see. This is why I can't stay sad. Mounds and mounds of yellow blooms bloating their ceramic homes with bounty. And these weeds, delicate clover with creamy petals at their heads, intermixing. Poppies multiply magically, unabashedly uninvited in this terracotta bowl, brimming with begonia, kalanchoe, and violet. Like mixed up crayons in a child's box, their colors bemuse, bewitch, and promise surprise. And then I'm almost done. This one here would have been our 51st wedding anniversary. And this one I wrote on that anniversary, and it's titled February the 3rd, 2019. Our wedding anniversary today, 51 years if you were still here. Rain that stayed away when we surrendered you to earth last fall pummels me when I bring you a bouquet. We celebrated last year's 50th with dinner and champagne. Now I walk the grass alone, mist hovering on headstones as I wend my way to your ribbon of ground. Companion tears clouds send soak my parka black. My rubber boots sink in sod and upturned soil on you plots. At your shoulders, your marble pillow slick with rivulets. I lay flowers like those you used to give, like what you would have set on my bedstand this morning if you were here. Bouquets you gave for 50 years. And the last poem is actually stage 5. It's based on, it's my interpretation of stage 5 of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief and loss. And this is resignation or acceptance. And I call it piecing the breakage. There comes a day when we resign ourselves as Hindi brides stepping into the pyre to the impermeable. The cudgel of loss has struck and it will not unswing itself. We grind teeth, gird tired loins, and plod on, blind, limping, bleeding, broken, or miraculously soothed into the new what is. Piecing the breakage together again may take priests, imams, wizards, shamans, or crystal ball gazers, elders, lovers, books, pilgrimages, or whatever trots a journey of loss with us. But the journey has been walked. All roads face forward from here.
Thank you so much, Thelma. That was absolutely beautiful. It was just directly from your heart to all of us. And I think we are all speechless right now. We're all grieving with you. We feel exactly your emotions, your love, your 5 stages, what you talked about as your memories, your family, nature, and then reflection. You were just so personal that you would share that with us and with all of your friends and family and everyone that doesn't know you, that just picks up and reads this beautiful book. And your poetry book can offer wonderful solace to everyone. It's beautiful, it's devastating, and it's very, very powerful. We're just really overwhelmed by it. Also, as a poet, your choice of words and your rhythm and how your descriptions of, especially when the one with your grandchildren, was very, very, very wonderful and emotional. So I can see and I understand, on maybe a happier note, that your book won lots and lots of awards, and it could have stickers all over the front of it saying what the wonderful awards are. Do you want to show us? You showed me a book earlier that has a sticker on it, but I understand it could have more stickers. So if you could tell us what the stickers are for, then we can all have a wonderful big smile and congratulate you on something just spectacular. Thank you.
Thank you. Luckily, it has only one sticker. My granddaughter put this on there. I've been very, very lucky that the book has been appreciated by several competitions. This one here is the International Latino Book Award, which is the largest and one of the oldest book competitions in America. And I got 2 of these, one in Best Biography and the other one in Best Poetry book by one author in English. And then the third, and those other stickers aren't here, that's just the only one.
But tell us about the other ones.
And the third one was, and these are all finalist awards. The third one was a Book Excellence Award in the category of poetry. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
How did you go about writing poetry? What would you recommend to everyone? I said that you talked about Emerson. Would you recommend that people actually just start reading what we in quotes call the famous poets? Wordsworth, Keats, Shelley.
Well, I was really lucky that even though I was born and raised in a very small, little, dusty Texas town, low socioeconomic status. We didn't even have paved roads. I never had a garden. Maybe one of the reasons I love gardens is I grew up totally with bare dirt and gravel and weeds and thorns and rocks, and that's all we ever saw, except in the other side of town where some grass existed. But one thing that I can say is that had excellent public schooling. I loved my teachers. I loved schooling. And I credit all my teachers and all my public education throughout my whole life. And there in Kingsville, Texas, I was there through my first 2 university degrees. So I was literally there from grade 1 all the way through until I married and moved out here. My teachers were great. My English teachers were particularly fantastic, and they had us reading all kinds of wonderful stuff. They had us memorizing poetry. I still remember some poems I memorized when I was a kid. They had us writing poetry, writing stories, and reading it to the class. And that's what encouraged me to be an English major when I was in college. My first 2 university degrees were majors in English. And then I think also that being a high school English teacher for 16 years, where I was, teaching American literature and having to keep up and reading and stuff along with the kids and having them write. I think all of that helped to inspire and nurture my love of poetry, even though I wrote some poetry when I was in high school, but never showed it to anyone. But regarding reading Emerson or any others, I believe strongly that as long as people are reading good poetry, it does not matter whether it's old or new. It doesn't matter whether it's a famous poet or not, man or woman, multicultural, they're all. In fact, ever since I became a poet, meaning I had a book published, most of the poetry reading that I do for my own entertainment these are all contemporary poets, Mary Oliver, Natasha Trethewey, Patricia Smith, Billy Collins. These are people who are still alive. Margaret Atwood, I just finished her newest book. So whatever catches your fancy, and multicultural if you can, and as diverse as you can. I believe that's the magic sauce that keeps us going and keeps us inspired to, and networking with poets, going to other poets' events, reading other poets' work. I love our local community of poets, our network, and several of them are here right now. And I just love their writing too. So read good poetry no matter what the source is.
Thank you very much. And I know that you taught in Pasadena Unified School District for those 16 years. And when we had the program at Central Library, when people could come in person several years ago, a lot of the staff members were saying that, oh, you taught my child. And there were lots of memories that evening with everyone who came. So anyway, people are congratulating you in the chat. They're saying you've captured the journey after death so eloquently. They're just thanking you so much for everything that you've done for us. So I encourage everyone to, when we put the book in the collection, to check the book out. As I said, we have 2 other of your poetry books, while not about the same subject, will be available for people can check out right now. And you can go to Vroman's and you can order the book a special order. I've chatted with them today, and you would just call up and put in a special order if you want a personalized copy. And that might be something that a lot of people would enjoy having, that you could reflect on regularly and look on it. Because I think if I remember right, there's 64 poems in there? 64 poems.
65 poems, I think.
65 poems?
Yeah, 65 poems.
5 poems, I'm sorry. So that is lots of wonderful reading that that someone can do, especially if when you sit out in your garden, as you say. Enjoy that so much. So are there any other questions in the chat for Thelma while we have this wonderful opportunity with her? So do you have, I don't see another question. Do you want to add?
Hello, this is Anna. May I ask a question?
Certainly.
Okay, I'm not sure if you can hear me or I wanted to know, I'm dealing with grief too, among other people, I'm sure. I lost a sibling in September to cancer, and I want to do something like explore poetry. So what would you suggest? Like, where do I start? This was a great interaction of hearing your poems. I'm very inspired. And so what would you suggest how I start, like with prompts, or how would I start? I've never done poetry before.
Oh, well, Anna, congratulations on wanting to write poetry and having an open mind and being happy and excited about this. And my sympathies on the loss of your brother and all any other friends and neighbors. I love talking to people, even strangers who have questions regarding poetry. Sometimes I'll get a phone call from someone. I had one the other day from Alabama, a person I've never known, but she somehow saw my picture, whatever, somewhere. She had written a chapbook and she wanted to know if I could give her some feedback on it. And we ended up having numerous conversations back and forth, and I did. I see mentoring, which is what I call giving advice and giving feedback and giving ideas, Anna. I see mentoring as something that's really, really an important part of a published author's life. I believe that we have to nurture the coming up generation. I believe that to be a community of people, there has to be a lot of reciprocity. I've always valued reciprocity. We authors in this community in Pasadena, Altadena, and the greater area, we support one another, we help one another. And I would love to do that. So Anna, I welcome you to go to my website, or you can just go to my Facebook, Thelma T. Reyna, and private message me, and I will give you my phone number, and I will be happy to have a comfortable conversation with you with some ideas, okay?
Great. Thank you for your generosity and your graciousness. Now, I just want a clarification. Did you say Reyna? Is it a T as in Tom or is a P as in Paul?
Reyna, Reyna. Is that
right?
Uh-huh. Thelma T.
Oh,
Reyna.
okay. Thank you so much. I will do that. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Anna.
Thank you very much, Anna. And thank you so much, Thelma, for your generosity in mentoring everyone. That is very, very helpful and something that everyone needs to get going, is just the suggestions. And someone else has just put in the chat, so proud of my former English teacher. Beautiful. So I know exactly what they mean, because that's what everyone was telling me that night at the library, that they were so thrilled to see you and remembering all of your wonderful teaching assistance with them and how they learned so much. So it's just, I think it's just a book that everyone can keep reading and reading, your Dearest Papa. And each time you're going to get something different out of it, or it'll comfort you in a different way. And I think during this pandemic here, it offers a lot of comfort to everyone, even if maybe you haven't lost somebody, but just to be aware of what's going on that has affected everybody. It has, even if you've lost no one, it has affected you something terribly. It has been a very difficult year for everyone for that way. So thank you so, so much for sharing so eloquently this journey for you. And I do know what you mean. If you could just step back from that day and have that day vanish, that would be something wonderful. But you've learned how to journey forth. So I want to remind everyone that we have 2 of your poetry books in the Pasadena Public Library. You go under Reyna, Reyna, Thelma T, to look up the 2 books. And those 2 books are called Hearts in Common Poems, Breath and Bone Poems. You can also, we will be having a copy of this book in the library's collection that you can check out with your Pasadena library card. But in the meantime, if you want a copy, if you call Vroman's in Pasadena, and they will place it on a special order for you. They have had the books in their bookstore, but right now you have to put in a special order for it. Okay, so I encourage everyone to do that. And Thelma, I can't thank you enough from the Pasadena Public Library, from myself, and from everybody that attended today's program for your generosity of spirit and sharing all of this with us this afternoon. Thank you so much.
And my thanks to all the people who showed up, all the participants. I'm so happy to see familiar faces and to see some new ones. And thank you for sharing this afternoon with us. And stay well, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming. Please look for our other virtual programs, and I'll look forward to welcoming you to those as well. Bye-bye.
Bye.